Hey, good morning, everyone. Mark Westcott here. My special guest today, Sharon Purcell. Welcome, Sharon.
Thank you very much, Mark. Lovely to be here.
There you are. It's obviously a bit chilly out there near Roma where you are.
Well, I actually thought winter was done and dusted about a week ago, and I got so excited. I took flannelette sheets off, I put doonas away, and it's come. But we had some really good rain a couple of nights ago, and it's come in a bit chilly after that. But I don't think it's going to last long.
Well, I'm glad you got the rain. Now, I know I normally save my my shirt up for Flash Shirt Friday. Can't even say it, Flash Shirt Friday. But the first time we met at the Young Beef Producers out at Roma, and we were sitting at the same table, there was those two guys that own Trademut or set up Trademut were there doing a presentation, weren't they? And do you want to talk about, because you'd know those guys, I guess, and you've seen these shirts out west a fair bit, I guess, these days, focusing on mental health.
Look, I came across the Trademut guys at a couple of functions, and I think the key message with all of that mental health stuff, particularly with a focus on the bush, is just that it's okay to put your hand up and ask for help. And I don't think you can send that message in any, well, you should be sending it any number of ways, and it comes in many forms currently, and it's a very welcome message.
Yeah. Oh, it's great. Well, you know, on the back of these shirts, as you know, there's a big sign that says, you know, this is a conversation starter. And I've got to tell you, it works. You know, here at Main Beach or in Southport, when I'm walking through shops, people actually come up just randomly wanting to have a chat to me and wondering why I'm wearing such a Larry shirt. But it's great. So it does serve its purpose. But let's get back to you. Enough about what we'll come back to men's mental health. Sharon, when I first met you, and look, you're one of these really lovely people because you, and I said this before we came on air, you know, you worked with AgForce before, now you're working with the Rural Financial Counselling Service, and you're just one of these people that really goes above and beyond in regard to trying to help people, and I really admire that in you. So can we first of all just talk about the work you did with AgForce, and then we'll go forward from there.
Okay, yeah, well, righto. I've certainly been involved in the rural industry for all of my life, basically just by living there and growing up in the bush. But I left, like most people particularly a lot of females in the industry, you know, you finish school and you head off to town and you get credentials and skills and you work in larger areas, which is great. But most of us that are brought up in the bush end up in the bush again as well. So one of the highlights of my career was certainly working for AgForce, and AgForce is a rural lobby group. So what AgForce does is basically stands up for farmers on their behalf, represents them, acts as a voice for the rural industry, particularly in negotiations with government and government ministers and departments to try and get the best possible outcomes for the rural industry. And AgForce is very successful at that, based purely on the model of the organisation, which is using farmers as volunteers, farmers and graziers, you know, as volunteers to represent their own industry. So that's why it works so well.
Yeah, you were pretty well burning both ends of the candle, I know, when you were working with AgForce. So you've taken a break. I'm going to say this: you've met someone, you've settled down, and now you've taken on your new role. Which is less time onerous and allows you to still be out there, you know, mustering the cattle and digging up the weeds, and you've still got a job on the side because I know you love contributing. And the new role is with Rural Financial Counselling Service, and maybe you can just take a few minutes to explain what that's about and the value that you're bringing to rural areas because of that.
Absolutely. So I certainly got to a stage in my career where I felt like to be able to be good at my job meant being completely focused on my job, and that obviously came at a cost at a personal level. So I had got to the stage where I decided I actually need to take a step back, because on average I was away from home or in a motel 3 nights on average every single week, and when I was home, you know, it was very full on, and you certainly felt a deep responsibility having a representative role to represent the rural industry at the highest possible level you could achieve. So that's all I ever tried to do. Whether I was successful or not was certainly someone else's call to judge, but I certainly felt like I gave it everything I could. So I got to a point where I just needed to be, before I'd been at AgForce, I was working for Queensland Country Life as a rural livestock rider and sales representative in the cattle side of things. And that was also on the road. So I looked back over 10 or 11 years of being on the road an awful lot and covering vast areas of Queensland to say, I actually just need some time where I can develop my home, my personal life, and be at home more. So with that in mind, I accepted a job with the Rural Financial Counselling Service doing the media and communications and event coordination. So that meant that while I still will be on the road for occasions, it might be more like twice or 3 times a month that I'm leaving home, and not always for a night away. I might just be away for the day. And that's certainly a lot more conducive to a happy home life. And my wonderful new partner, Cam, who's very understanding of it all, but he lives on a property south of Roma. So the other benefit of this job was I could work from home. So one day a week I go into town and meet with my boss, Jenny Whipp, who's the CEO of the Rural Financial Counselling Service in southern Queensland, and we tic-tac about the events that are happening, the media and press releases that need to be done and all that sort of thing. But I'm home for smoke, I'm home for lunch, I'm home at night the majority of the time, and it works perfectly for me.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I'm glad you've been able to find that balance in your life too, Sharon, because I know you're really burning the candle at both ends, and you're always, certainly always away. But, one of the things that, and we did touch on this before, and I just want to tell this story. And I think it's just such a great story for anybody. And this goes across all sorts of businesses, for anyone that's starting their own business or getting involved in something new. I love the story about what you did when you first went to Roma, because you only knew one person, didn't you? And tell me about all the hobbies and activities you got involved in when you went to Roma.
Well,
Some of these are random, but they're great.
Well, I have been accused of being a boots and all sort of personality, and there's not much you can do to change your personality. You are born who you are, and you just sort of got to roll with it, with life. So when I left, I'd been up in Rockhampton working for Country Life and AgForce, and initially there was a job that came up in Roma where I could transfer with AgForce. So I applied for that, and I was successful in doing it. So I came down here, and in Roma there was a girl that I went to school with, Tracy, and she was a great source of company when I moved here, but I wasn't going to rely on ARF for that company. So I put myself out there, and I went to clay target shooting, and I used to go there twice a week, and I met all the locals there. I joined the tennis club, and I'd go and play tennis there on a Monday night. I also got involved with the local theatre company and was in a musical, which was I've always done a lot of that stuff, but years ago. So, now that I was 49, 50 at the time, thinking, I'm not sure this is the time to be getting back into theatre. But anyway, so I did that and loved that. So, yeah, just sort of tried to find as many things. Played touch football for a while as well, which proved to me that I'm not 21 anymore and that they run an awful lot in touch football. So all very good for you physically, but also really good mentally with putting yourself out there, and you get back what you put out. I've met so many people in my couple of years at Roma, and some fantastic people.
I also miss all your social media posts. You used to post all this stuff all the time in your AgForce role, and you're really more subdued these days. So.
I am. Well, I'm also more mindful of my partner, Cam, is not quite as outgoing and as transparent as I am. So I have to be very mindful of there's someone else that I'm involving in a lot of this stuff. So I have to be checking that. But I'm certainly living a much more subdued life, a much more settled life. And yeah, there are certainly aspects of my single life that I miss, but there's also aspects of my coupled life that I absolutely love.
That's right. Don't change it for anything. But I just want to know if, as part of this today, are we going to hear the song or the songs that you sang? You're going to break into tune for us in the musical.
No problems at all. I can't think of one right off. The musical was probably not something that was that comes straight to mind, but I'll sing you a little song. Let me be there in your morning. Let me be there in your night. Let me take whatever's wrong and make it right. Make it right. There you go.
That is awesome, Sharon. Well, you have a beautiful voice. I never knew that. See, that's because I didn't come to obviously didn't come and see the musical.
No, that's right. And that wasn't quite country music at the musical, but yes, anyway.
No, well done. No, you do. You have a lovely voice. But I just want to get back and I just think that's such a great lesson when you moved to Roma, what you did, because lots of times people, for whatever reason, end up in a new community, don't they? They move for whatever reasons. They get transferred. They have to move. They they have to get away from people. Whatever it is, they end up in a new area. And I just love the list of things that you did. Like when I used to see. On Facebook, photos of you out practicing your clay target shooting and so on, and then the next minute you're doing a musical. I thought, wow, this is one versatile lady. And then you're playing football, tennis, and all the other things. But as a result of that, you are now so well known in that community, and you're so respected and so loved for the energy and the passion with which you do things. And I want to get back to talking about what you're doing with rural financial counselling service. So that was just my plug for what a nice person you are. But the rural financial counselling service, you're the media and communication person, and financial counselling. We talked about this off air. Was that there's a lot of people, and I would suspect certainly at the moment, where it's all very well to talk about financial counselling, but mental health, emotional counselling, and so on is obviously going to be a big part of that for the people that are in your organisation. But for the customers in the rural area.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Rural Financial Counselling Service delivers two programs, and we're federal and state government funded. The two programs that we deliver are, one is for small business owners and one is for rural business owners. So and I'm simplifying it here, but certainly there's those two programs. We have two teams of counsellors that are very specialised, either in the small business or the rural side of things. When we're looking at the rural side of things, the financial stress points or challenges for business owners in primary production are no different to small businesses. But as I've touched on with numerous times when I speak to people, there is a very big distinct difference because home is business for primary producers. So it's not that easy to just knock off work, close the office door and go home and sit down with the family and relax, because everyone's working in the same business. You're living on the property, with cattle yards are right next door, sheep yards are right next door, the crops when you look out the front paddock. So you don't escape like you're able to. So some of those stresses are mental and financial, and obviously they're interlocked. So if you're having financial challenges in your business and you're not being able to check out and get away, then that's obviously causing some mental strain as well. So while the Rural Financial Counselling Service doesn't give emotional or mental counselling, that we certainly can put people in touch with people who specialise in that sort of things. But what we deliver will certainly alleviate some of that mental stress by taking a big picture look at your business, trying to work out what you can do for the future to prepare better for drought or to respond better to the one you've just gone through, and how you can set yourself up financially for that sort of stuff. And also there's a lot of government support programs like the Regional Investment Corporation and Q-Rider, the Farmer Household Allowance. There's a lot of support available that we can assist financially challenged primary producers and small business owners with.
So Sharon, is there a lot of pride involved in this? Do some rural farmers, graziers resist coming to you because it's a sign that they're struggling financially and so on? Is there does pride get in the way?
It can do, and that's a big part of my role. So my role is officially the Outreach Communications Officer. So one of my roles is to ensure that people understand what we do, that they can put a face to the service so they understand who their counsellors are in their region, and that they can develop relationships and networks both through social media and through attending events that we're hosting, so that we can build a trust and a rapport that breaks down some of those barriers about pride. And it becomes, we're not here to tell you what to do in your business. We're here to work with you to come up with solutions together, and you decide what you want to do and you set the direction for your business. And so it's a very collaborative approach. It's not a big brother, we know what you should do. We'll have a look at your books and we'll tell you what you should do. Never will be like that, because that will never work in our industry. So yeah, it's continuing those relationships.
Yeah. So look, let's talk about last week at Gundawindi. So you very kindly invited me to come down and present to a function that you put on, a succession planning focus function in Gundawindi, and it was actually a really good turn. I was really impressed with the number of people that turned up and the quality of the people that turned up. There were just some really lovely families were there. I think you ended up with 35, 38 people ended up registering, I think, from memory for the day. And I mean, especially these days with social spacing between the chairs, it was definitely a full room. But I mean, that was you had an accountant, you had a solicitor that you invited along, you had someone from one of the banks, and one of your own people as well as me. And to be honest, and forget my part in that, but I mean, it was, you could see I was the last speaker, but I mean, so up to lunch, everyone else had spoken, and I mean, there was just a really great feeling in the room. People were really appreciative of the quality of the speakers that you'd invited up to that point, and not so much after lunch, I'm not sure, but no, there was a really good feeling. Nobody left. I mean, everyone was still there after lunch. We had a break. They stayed, and everyone was there right till the very end. And it was a really good session, Sharon, and credit to you. But more so, I was interested in the sort of people that were there. They were all successful people, and I was, you seem to be putting on all sorts of different functions in all sorts of different venues, and really getting involved with people. That's obviously part of your aim. So if they're not interested in, say, succession planning, you're putting on a country barbecue at Muckadilla in a couple of weeks, and I had to go and Google it. That was just the other side of Mitchell.
Yeah, well, you didn't. It's Mungalala. So there's there's Muckadilla, there's Wallumbilla, there's Mungalala, there's a million of those smaller towns. So yeah, so what we're doing, so Gundawindi was really good, because my role, we have I don't know, about 23 rural financial councillors across southern Queensland. So my job is to talk to each of those councillors and say, we want to do something in your region to help introduce you and the service to the locals. Do you have some insider info from your region about what you'd like to see, or what do you think would fit really well? And Nicole Gammick, the gorgeous, beautiful Nicole Gammick from Gundawindi, suggested that succession planning was something that she thought would go really well. And it did. From the first time we started talking about it to locals, there was a lot of interest in it. So we knew it was going to go well. The challenge is with the coronavirus restrictions, and particularly down close to that border, how that was going to unfold. But it just never was an issue. They were keen as mustard to get that information. And I think that's a sign of good operators, when they're keen to take advice from as many places as they can get it, and then make their own decisions. So, and I certainly invited you because of the work I'd seen you do in Roma, and how well, particularly, with that 200 or 300 young beef producers responded to your presentation. I thought you've got that cut through with that industry. And there's also value in having someone from away from the local region handling things like succession planning, because it is a very confronting issue, and it's very emotionally and relationship fraught. So in a lot of ways, it's easy to get someone from outside the region to come in and sit down and develop those relationships, but they know you're not going to the pub and talking about who you were seeing that day. So that had a lot of attraction from where we were sitting. So, and then we needed to get a few of those other professionals, the accountants and the solicitors and the bankers to talk about the logistics of succession planning. But there's an awful lot of stuff. So we've also got some funding, like you touched on, with Mungalala. And what we're going to do is we've got Maddie Thomas, who was a contestant on The Voice from locally. So she's coming along. We've got Mr. Fireworks from Brisbane, and we're going 15 minutes of fireworks in Mungalala. And it's just going to be a free barbecue. Rotary's getting on board, and the Marinara Regional Council. So it's all tied in with coming up with different events locally that will resonate and help us to let people know that there is support for them, financially, counselling wise, if they want to take advantage of it.
Sure, that's fantastic, you know, especially the way that you're trying to connect with your people in each of those areas as well, because you know, I'll come back to it. There'll be people who would be embarrassed to have to stick up their hand and say they want some help from a a financial counselling point of view, and you know, when you and sorry, the girl in Gundawindi with the moon boot, Nicole with the moon boot. She had her moon boot on. I mean, you know, when you just see nice, fresh, happy faces out there, and you know, you guys are all, you know, credit to you. You're all very good at relationship building, and you know, no one's going to feel under any stress or pressure, and they'll be happy to talk to someone like you about things that are, you know, financial and personal. And you raise a good point too, and you know, they don't want someone. Their local accountant or solicitor talking about them down at the pub. So yeah, maybe that's they were up. And I love the presentation. You talk about succession planning being an emotional thing. There was one point, apart from myself, there were 4 or 5 people in the audience all had tears in our eyes at one part of my presentation. So I think we obviously got in, because it is an emotional, you know, succession planning isn't a very emotional, it is a very emotional thing. And you know, people need to be emotionally connected and prompted for them to take action. Otherwise, they just, you know, put it off and procrastinate about it until another day. But today's not about me.
Yeah, well, like we touched on with that succession planning, there's a lot of it's passing on the family business that someone's built up, but it's not just the business. Again, I hark back to that. It's the home. It's the home of the kids. It's where the grandchildren will be living. There's a lot of emotion with all of that, and to have those discussions, there's so many aspects to that. You know, the age-old adage of, you know, someone's built up a business, should they hand that on? Does a child have a right to expect that to be passed on, or should they be building their own life and letting their parents build that and then retire on that funding and then look at it after they've left? There's so many conversations being had around that, and there's no wrong and right answer. You know, it's very individual and it's very emotional again, you know, the financial consequences of succession planning and taking a big picture look at your business and planning for the future, and things like marriage breakdowns. You know, if you've got 4 sons and they've each married 4 wives, and then 2 of them break down, and that's the stage you're at when you're succession planning, are you a bit guarded then about involving the women that have hung around? You know, there's so much to it all.
Oh, look, absolutely. And, you know, one of the things I talk about, seeing we're on succession planning, is that my first priority is always to the spouse, so that if anything happens to, let's say, dad, as an example, that mum's going to be okay, that she's protected. And secondly, then it's all about the kids, to make sure the kids, there's a fairness to the outcome, so that the kids still get together at Christmas as mates and they're not all squabbling over money. In fact, it's I've actually named the conversation I have with the children as part of my process. We have a gratitude conversation, because I want to make it clear right from the start, if any of the kids turn up to me with an expectation or an entitlement attitude, I frankly feel like giving them a kick up the backside, because nothing about succession planning should be an entitlement. You know, even if you're the son that's worked there for 30 years, I mean, you know, if you're ever going to have a sense of entitlement, I guess that probably should be it. But for anyone else to turn up and have an entitlement about money is never a good starting point. So once again, gratitude is such an important part of the whole process, and that's how it should be. Now, Sharon, you were talking before about, we were talking about mental health and so on before, and I wanted to come back to this, because I think it's an important part of what's happening out west at the moment, because there's still plenty of people in absolute stone cold drought, and people who are struggling. We did talk about someone that I saw at Toowoomba recently, who runs business called, sorry, a program I can't remember. All I could remember was it had a kangaroo in the logo, but it's
Mary O'Brien with the "Are You Bogged, Mate?"
Are You Bogged? Yes, and I just love that. I love that. She actually spoke at the seminar I did at the workshop, whatever I did at Toowoomba several weeks ago, and she just comes up with some astoundingly, well, they're not good statistics, but you know, astounding statistics in regard to how big the issue is in regard to men's mental health. And and she tells a good story, doesn't she? And I love your analogy. Guys try and run away from this because we're men, and we're big and strong, but the truth is men are committing suicide at an unfortunate rate, and she really tackles it front on, doesn't she?
She's very, very good in what she does, and it's because she's a very direct person. So, there are very different personalities at play in the human race, and there are certainly people who are comfortable with being direct and upfront, and there are those that are very, very uncomfortable with that. I think when you're dealing with rural men and you're a female and you're trying to connect with them in a professional manner, there is absolutely no better way than to be direct, because they're short on time, they're very practically driven. And I use this example all the time that, if you're a person in town, or particularly in a big company, and you're driving along and you notice that something's got to be fixed. Say you see a leaking tap next to the building. So usually you'd ring the faculty that's involved with fixing taps and let them know that that's got to be done. So if you're in the bush, if you're going for a drive and you see a leaking tap, you've either got to fix it straight away or it won't get fixed. So they're very, very practical with the way they process things. So if you're going to pussyfoot around the issue and not come out and say it, they probably won't get the message. So Mary delivers it very well. It's very direct, it's in your face, and she takes no prisoners. She makes no excuses for the fact that she's here to make them think about their mental health. And it works very, very well.
Yeah, she certainly does a very good job, and you're absolutely right. It's like a sledgehammer approach, and you can't help but listen to her and follow along her story. So credit to her, and I think there should be more of this in the bush, because mental health in rural areas is just such a big issue at the moment, and you would see this more and more probably in your financial counselling role than you probably did even in Ag Force, I would suspect.
Yeah, well, certainly I don't myself, as I've explained, I do the media and communications, so I promote the other guys that do the counselling, but we certainly see aspects of the mental health. We don't deal with it directly, but certainly they're the most resilient, amazing people you will ever meet, people from the bush. And it harks back to that practical outlook, because it's a practical upbringing. It's a very confronting, very in your face, cattle die, sheep die, you feed them, you look after them, they get sick, you make them better. It's a very, it's in your face. So when you're brought up that way, you can't help but think that way as you get into an adult stage of life. And emotions aren't something that are talked about often at all. I'm sure some of the mums are pretty good at it, but my father certainly never spoke about how he felt, although I will say as he's getting older and he's nearly 80 that he's coming around, I must say. So there is hope for bushmen that they will start talking about emotions a bit more. But I think what happens, it might not be just rural blokes. It might be all sorts of blokes, to be honest, but certainly rural ones are the ones I'm dealing with all the time.
I think it's rural blokes, Sharon.
Oh, do you?
Rural blokes just don't talk. I mean, and that's the issue in my business too, is that that generation, I mean, the younger ones do more so, but certainly the older generation, the hardest part of my role in succession planning is that the older generation don't talk about any of this stuff. They don't talk about succession planning. They don't talk about their emotions. They don't talk about anything. And communication, is just such a big part of this, and helping people start the conversation. Sorry.
Yeah, and a lot of that with rural blokes is you have to actually ask the question. So are you thinking that if you do this, that'll happen? And all they have to say is yes or no, rather than saying, so what are you thinking? You've sort of got to ask a very direct question.
That way you'll just get a nothing. What are you thinking? Yeah, nothing. So right. Yes and no questions. Yes and no questions are great. Hey, look, we've just got a few seconds left, but Sharon, I want to ask you, this was Tea and Scones was born when COVID started, and I wanted to have it every Monday as a way to help start the week with positivity, gratitude, and all good things such as that. Do you have a process yourself? Like, you know, you're a really, you know, I just love the person you are. You're really positive, motivated, and you just get out and you get shit done. So, what do you it was a technical term. What do you
Yes.
do, Sharon? You know, do you have a ritual of any sort? Are you a gratitude person? Do you meditate? Do you do any of that sort of stuff?
Look,
Or
when
do you just get it done?
well, I always have been a get it done. I just get on with it. There's just no point. If you think of doing something, do it then, not next week, because you never do it if you wait. But
Yeah.
I will say that I did go through a stage when my marriage broke down that I did really struggle with my motivation. And I did start a gratitude journal, and I used to write at least 3 things every day down that I was
Right.
thankful for. And some days it was amazing things like, oh, I'm so grateful for my baby girl and boy, who are just the most amazing things that have ever drawn breath. To the next day, it might be, I'm really grateful that the air conditioner's working because it's hot outside. So it didn't worry me what, but I had to say 3 things that I was grateful for.
Yeah.
And I really only had to do that for 3 months. And then the next 3 months, I just thought of it every day. I didn't write it down. And I have definitely got myself to a stage now where I refuse to look on the negative side of things. I'm allowed to acknowledge something that's negative, but I have to back it up with something positive. So it might be, you know, that person is really irritating me today, but I am so pleased I'm here and not sitting at the office desk. You know, I've got to do that. There is no way that you can have a successful life where you look ahead if you don't focus on the good stuff in life, and there is plenty of it.
Yeah, look, absolutely. And you know, the good thing about gratitude and focusing on the good things, but especially about try being grateful for something and then get angry.
Yes,
You can't do it if you're thinking grateful thoughts. All negative stuff goes straight out of your head. So, hey, Sharon, look, we're over time by a couple of minutes, but it's been fantastic. Thank you for being on Tea and Scones today. You're a great person and love what you're doing in the world. So, look forward to talking soon.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.